once again for attending. We're doing this memorial for 40 miners who were killed on the 24th of October 1838 in John Pit. Some say Harrington, some say Lowca. Both are correct because it's about halfway between. John Pit, which is over on the hillside there, was the prime location for Kerwin getting his coals for Harrington, and it was the biggest exporter from Harrington was from John Pit. Earlier in its life, John Pit had been ventilated from Hodson Pit, which is over in the field over there, and they'd made a change and decided to use Jane Pit as an upcast shaft, and there was a fire in the shaft. The fellow who was attending the fire the day before said he'd heard a ruckus and the shaft falling away, so he informed the overman. When the overman got down, there was a space about 18 inches bottom of the shaft, and left a space about 18 inches and about 2 feet wide. So that was all there was for the ventilator, John Pit. They were going to do something about it, no doubt, but they didn't. The next morning, when the first shift went down, the normal practice was for everyone to wait at the pit bottom until the overman had inspected the pits to see that everything was all right. On that morning, the overman went in by, and the next thing they knew, there was the explosion happened, and it came out and blasted with such a force that it went straight up the shaft. And it went that far up into the sky that all the people on the pit top took off across the fields and didn't stop running until the fire stopped. Unfortunately, or fortunately for some of them, there was a basket in the shaft holding 4 people, 2 men and 2 boys. It was like, used like a cannon. It went straight up the shaft, came out the top, and the 2 boys, one landed on the shaft side with his legs dangling over the shaft. Another one landed on a structure that was used to get the baskets off, and it was at an angle, and he was still in the basket. One man was blown over a heap of coals and survived. The other one went straight up and fell down. All the other people down the pit died that day, 40 in total, and that's what we're here to commemorate this day. I'd like to ask John to say a few words and lead us with the Lord's Prayer, and then we'll read the names, have a minute's silence, and take it from there, and lay the flowers up there.
Well, my first observation was it's one of these pits that used a basket to get men down and up out of the pit. I often look back and think to myself, whatever happened to basket house? I suppose at the time the council took it out of place to ease the passage of traffic.
It's supposed to widen the road.
And I look at that, and now, in order to reduce speed, we've got speed bumps. Wouldn't have that been an ideal thing to have an island round it and leave it there? But time moves on, and is it just a case that some of our history is people don't appreciate it and they just do away with it? One thing I do know, that if it had been in the States, they would have moved everything to keep it, because they don't have that much history. And as David says about this shaft, there was 2 overmen. There was one down the pit, attempting to do tests to make sure it was safe for the work, a fellow called Hetherington. Unfortunately, it wasn't to be. The explosion took place. And Dave says the basket was blown up the shaft. Now, how much clearance there was between the basket and the shaft itself, I really don't know, but it must have been a hell of a push to push it right up. We don't. It's maybe the first time that I can say, I look at it and I think to myself, what an explosion that must be. But also as well, down in the shaft where the workings were, apparently there were north and south, and it blasted men, these workers that was waiting to start the work, to either end of them two shafts. You think of the force and the speed, and the only thing that I can refer it to, as I see it, it's a bit like a jet engine. The energy that would be involved in it. But of course, like all these situations, people lost their lives. And I just look down them and I think, most of us here, maybe but Joe, I don't know yet how old Joe is, but he's pushing that way. Most of us are 70 plus. These poor kids never seen 20. Haven't we been fortunate to be able to live this long and experience life as it should be? 14, 18, 12 or 14, 14. There's Robert Dunn, 14. John Dunn, a brother. It doesn't say how old he is, but if I go down the list, there's John Wilson, 30, James Wilson, 35, James left a widow and 5 children, and then there was Jonathan, a lad of 12 years, son of James. And of course, as what I said, wherever we were last week, I can't remember. You look at these kids, and they've got no life, have they? No. They've been nowhere. And of course, there was no school, or if you did go to school, you had to be wealthy and pay for it. That was the unfortunate thing. Whereas today, we've all had an education, and we understand a certain amount of what's going on. Maybe not fully understand, but we have a reasonable thought on things and such like. These people were just ignorant young lads going down the pit, and most probably at the satisfaction of Kerwin as well, because they were there to bring the call out and all that sort of thing, doing the manual jobs, the young lads of 12 and 14 and all that lot. And you just think about it. Crackers, if I asked my grandson to do something, or granddaughter, crackers, they'd have dicky fits if I said we're going to carry coal out of the pit. People don't appreciate just what these people did. And there's a young lad, his father, 50 years at Pye's house, left a wife and a child. Robert Peel, a young lad, 11 years, and you go on. And I mean, that's only one piece of it. There's another thing. At the inquest, or whatever it was, they didn't go to a pub or an inn. And normally they'll go to them places because the size of the room to get the jury and whatever and everybody in that was going to give their spiel about what was going on. It went to the house of a Mr. Carr, before William Bragg. The disaster was supposed to have been caused by a culmination of gas being ignited by Etheridge's candle as he carried the lamp, but used it only for examinations. That's the first time that we've seen.
It was a pit where naked lights were used.
As I say, it's the first time that it hasn't been held in a pub and that. So he most probably had a reasonable sized house, or was well off. I don't know which. You'd have to look that out.
It could be that the house of Mr. Carr was a pub.
Was it?
That's how they referred to it.
All right. Well, that's
It
another.
didn't name the pub, but it named the person who ran the pub.
All right.
I think if you
so
look
was
in the
Blocks,
list, his thing as an
George
innkeeper. He's
Well, I haven't got that here, but I suppose that could be. I don't know why they just didn't put the pub down rather than his name. I don't know. But anyway, that's
Publicises the pub.
Eh?
It publicises the pub.
Aye. you know. And of course, at that time, that's where all these inquests and that were held. Slowly, we had a decent sized room, and most probably liquid fresh refreshment was on the hand. I don't know, but I suspect there was a bit of that in it. Right. I don't think there's much else to say really. We've been to these before, and I'm becoming to feel, I don't know whether you feel this way or not, but when you look at all these lives, young people's lives that were lost, I just think to myself, aren't we fortunate today to be able to live this long? The Lord's Prayer. Our Father,
Who art in heaven,
hallowed
hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Right, the next part is for David Banks has agreed to read the names out. So we'll read the names and then have a minute's silence.
Thomas Pearson Addison, William Addison, Fletcher Benson, John Benson, Jonathan Benson, Eldred Burnett, Joseph Cape, George Crellin, John Ditchburn, Peter Dobson, James Donnelly, Richard Donnelly, John Dunn, Robert Dunn, George Edgar, Joseph Kinson, Joseph Payton, William Codrington, Robert Teasdale, Harrison K, John Kelly, Joseph Metcalf, James Moore, William Moore, Robert Nichol, Harrison Pale, Henry Pale, Robert Pale, John Ralph, John Richardson, Ralph Sanderson, Richard Scrugham, Henry Ward, James Wilson, John Wilson, Jonathan Wilson, James Wynne, John Wynne, Robert Wynne.
Right, I wonder if you could lead us in a minute's silence, Joseph, please.
Right, we'll start now. That's 1 minute. We will remember them.
We will remember.
We will remember
I'll
them.
lay these flowers in honour of them. I'll just lay them down. And thank you all for coming. I feel it's very worthwhile, this ceremony.